And we are happy to welcome Lynn Zammit to the studio. She is the director of the Center for Transformative Practices. Welcome to TVO.
Thank you very much.
I want to start by, first of all, just getting you to tell us about the law that the province of Ontario just passed, the Accepting Schools Act, which aims over a course of a whole bunch of different areas to get tougher on bullying. What's your reaction to what they've tried to do?
I'm not sure that getting tougher on bullying is really going to shift the problem. I think we should certainly react to bullying. I think we should deal with it. But getting tougher might not lead us in the direction we hope to go.
We're going to talk about your approach in a second, but can you, I mean, based on what you know about it, can you imagine that it will have any positive impact on reducing bullying in our schools?
I think the part of the Act that addresses the need to look at the issues of victimization, to address the needs of victims of bullying, to address the bystanders who have witnessed it and done nothing, to raise skills among all students, especially the bully, in terms of social emotional intelligence. I think those things will improve the state of bullying.
So as far as it goes, you're okay with it. It's just, it may not do everything you want it to do.
I just think that saying that we're going to expel bullies is a very short-term, short-sighted solution.
Okay, well, in that chair a few days ago was Ontario's Minister of Education, Laurel Broden. We talked about this, and here's what she had to say about what she hopes will be the effectiveness of her legislation. Roll tape, please. So play it out. Some kid sends another kid a threatening email saying, you show your face in the school tomorrow, I'm going to kill you. What do you do?
We're going to work through the very detailed structure within the Accepting Schools Act, where the principal can intervene, where the teacher might intervene, whoever is the adult that knows about what has transpired. I mean, obviously they have to be informed about it, but the key thing is they have the tools, a full and wide range, from early intervention and teaching children in our curriculum all the way through to expelling a student if that's what we need to do to make someone else safe, to be able to come to school.
How does that sound to you?
I certainly agree with the minister. I think just because we have the ability to expel a student doesn't mean we have to. There are other methods that we can use that will probably have a bigger effect.
For example, let's get to the way you like to do business and have really sort of broken ground and been a pioneer in this area. Restorative justice. What is that?
Well, Steve, let me put it this way. There's two types of justice as far as I'm concerned. A justice that is about getting even, and a justice that is about getting well. And I'd prefer to have people get well.
Getting even is irresistible for some people.
It is, it is. It's a short-term game with a lot of consequences. I've never found, and I've worked with hundreds of suspended and expelled students in my career, I've never found that just punishing students really has the desired effect, and often it just opens up to a whole other set of problems.
You've been at this for almost 20 years, right? You started the first one in 1994, the first program?
That's right.
Where'd you get the idea?
Actually, the idea for our project came from the Maoris of New Zealand. They have teachings about restoring the balance when things go wrong in a community. Our own native populations have similar belief systems, and you can find it in many Aboriginal populations across the world, that when we focus on the notion of community and connectedness, things will sometimes go wrong in community. People will harm other people. And it's up to the community to determine how we're going to get over this harm, how we're going to address the needs of both the people who have harmed and the people who have been harmed, and how can we learn to live again in that state of community and harmony.
So that sounds like an overarching societal approach. I wonder if you could explain to us how you take those principles and apply them in a school setting.
Sure. Let's take an example of a classroom. At the beginning of September, a teacher begins the dialogue with, how do we choose to be with each other in this classroom for the year? Okay? How do we develop right relationships with each other? And what do we do when things go wrong? Because we're humans and we will have missteps along the way. That's part of the learning process for young people. So when things go wrong, when bullying happens, when incidents happen on the schoolyard, how we choose to respond teaches our young people a lot about our notions of justice. To say we will just punish the offender, we will banish them from the kingdom, teaches them that those short-term consequences may be the way to go. And certainly in society, you know, there's a lot of people that would say, well, just jail all the criminals. The other side says, if we were to work collectively and share our stories about the harm that's been caused, if we collectively could problem solve and through consensus building come up with some solutions that really worked for both the victim and the offender, and we could learn to rebuild those relationships and rebuild that sense of connectedness and community, maybe that in the long term would be a healthier solution for us.
That sounds, I'm guessing, to the average 16-year-old young man seething with testosterone, like a very touchy-feely approach to take that he'll laugh out of the hall. It isn't?
Well, we've been using it with suspension and expulsion programs for many, many years. The big burly kid that brings the gun to school can sit in a circle and process that harm and do a fabulous job. I think part of the process is we believe people have the capacity to change and grow and develop a sense of empathy. There was a Canadian Wellness Index released last year from Waterloo University. And in that study, they looked at the wellness of Canadians from 1994 to 2008. One of the disturbing pieces was that they found that social and emotional skills within our young people have actually been on the decline. And in particular, the two for this conversation, young people's ability to develop intimate friendships, so connectedness with other people, and their sense of empathy, their skill of empathy had been going downhill.
We've been operating under the assumption that we're talking about high school students here, but I presume you could start this earlier if you wanted to?
We have circles in kindergarten classes.
In kindergarten?
Yeah.
What do you do in kindergarten?
Sally takes Billy's ball on the playground.
Huh.
Okay. Do we punish Sally, or do we have them sit down and have a talk about what happened? How did that make Billy feel? What Sally can do to kind of, help Billy get over it? How they're going to play in the playground next time? And we just build on that idea of creating those circles and that dialogue every time something goes wrong. We can do it for the little things that happen in classrooms every day as part of classroom management. We can do it for the big incidents that sometimes involve expulsions and sometimes involve police charges being laid.
But just a logistical question here. Once a kid gets to school, he or she is pretty much programmed to the hilt all through the day. How much time does this take, and do they have time to do this?
I'm glad you brought up the question of time, because when I do training in school boards, no teacher has ever said to me, Lynn, I don't think that this would work. I don't think that this would be good for my children. What they tell me is, we don't have enough time. All right? So I'd like to kind of reflect on the medical system and say, what if you went to the doctor and the doctor said to you, we have a cure for your illness. We just don't have enough time to administer it. So you're just going to have to make do.
Yeah, but the patient doesn't say, that's all well and good, doc, but I got math in 5 minutes, and then lunch break, and then I got history in the afternoon, and then geography, and then, there are some realities about the school day.
Yeah, it's about a province setting priorities about what skills are important for our young people to learn. And I would say that doing math and doing spelling and doing reading in school is just as important as teaching them how to do community, because we are growing citizens, both locally and globally. How do we want them to be in the world by the time their education is finishing? What kinds of skills and attitudes do we want them to carry forward into their lives? And to me, that sense of citizenship and being responsible to each other and for each other is critical.
So this crisis resolution process for you is as important as the 3 R's. Find the time during the day is what you're saying.
Well, I would say it's more important, because all the research shows us that when you focus on emotional intelligence, social emotional skills in young people, academics improve. So it's not ever one or the other. It's we can do both on a daily basis if the teachers have the right skills and training to do that.
Well, in fact, you brought some testimonials along, and I'll read just a couple of them here and share with our viewers. Here's the first one. This is from a grade 6 female victim of bullying. I think something good that I didn't think would happen is when every one of the girls talked. I expected them to say things like, she said this, and then she did that, but they each took responsibility for their actions, and it made me feel they really were sorry. We all walked away with new tools to work with if a problem comes up again. And then here's one here from a grade 8 bully saying of their new relationship with the victim, it's really crazy and you won't believe this. Surprisingly, we have become really good friends out of this circle. We hang together inside and outside of the school. It's all good. How typical is that?
Very typical. I would say that we've never had a circle yet that hasn't been successful.
You've never had a circle that was not successful?
never.
Meaning there's no recidivism at all?
Well, in the circles that we have followed, there's been no recidivism of the students that have participated. And that holds true in the research for the justice system as well, that young people that go through this process develop emotional intelligence and skills along the way. There's a huge support component put in place to assist them in sort of reconnecting and doing well and making amends for the the harm that they've caused. And putting those things in place seems to be the key to change their thinking, to change the behavior. It certainly involves a sense of shame. You know, you have to confront your victim face to face. And certainly my students in the expulsion program clearly said to me at the end of the circle, if we knew how difficult that was going to be, we would rather have done jail time. Because jail time is easy. That was hard. So sometimes for a couple of hours, they're sitting listening to victims talk about the impact that they've had on their lives. Parents are involved, school officials are involved, sometimes police, community. It is a very impactful process.
There is a lot of cultural pressure, though, on those who have been bullied to just suck it up and not come forward.
Absolutely.
How does your situation deal with that notion of coming forward?
Yeah. Well, victims often don't come forward because they think the adults will make it worse. And normally, we do. As an example, I was dealing with a bullying situation in Toronto, and the school had suspended the bully. They said, we've dealt with the issue. The bully's no longer in our building. You know, case closed. When I interviewed the victim, he said, don't they understand how hard they've made my life now? They said, we live in the same apartment building. Now I'm afraid to get on the elevator every morning. How did that solution help me? So restorative justice looks at being able to allow victims to talk about the solutions that make sense to them, okay? What would that really look like if I felt safe again? It seems to me that we want to give people an opportunity to share in the solutions, and that's really good learning for our young people to say solutions are available, we just have to struggle and find them. That in itself is a huge learning moment that, you know, we have the capacity to do that.
How many school boards do this in Ontario?
I would say the majority of school boards have it written in their Safe Schools policy that they use restorative justice. How active are they in doing this? I'm not sure. I think it really depends on the level of training that they've had and the level of commitment to really making a difference in their schools and not doing the quick fix.
Here's some numbers from last fall from the Ministry of Education, because we do suspend quite a bit, actually.
Yes, we do.
Even though the rates are coming down. Let's bring these figures up if we can. If you go back 10 years, you can see on an enrollment of 2.1 million students, the suspension rate is a little over 7.25%. But in the ensuing years, 04 to 05, it's down to 7% and change. 06, 07, down to 5.5%. 09, 10, just over 4%. Can you categorically say that these suspension rates are coming down because more boards are using your ideas?
Absolutely not. I would love to be able to say that. What I do know is in the areas that have fully embraced restorative justice, the numbers are declining. That is certain. What I will say is that there's been a push to lower suspension rates because it doesn't make boards look good. And so teachers will tell me that they're just told they're not going to suspend these students. They're not going to suspend because they don't want to have that kind of a reputation. I don't think that they're adequately dealing with the problems. They're just avoiding a suspension. Who knows what they're doing in place of suspension? And so I think we have to be careful about that kind of data. It doesn't necessarily mean that schools are safer, more welcoming places for students.
There is a tendency in the education system, and I don't mean to pick on them because it's in all walks of life, but to kind of take a problem and kick it down the road a bit, you know. Do you see a lot of that?
I do. Safe schools is a very, you know, it's like nailing Jell-O to a wall. What does that really mean, okay, to have safe, inclusive, caring communities? And this whole uproar over the past few weeks about the Accepting Schools Act was shocking to me because I think we missed the mark. I think when the act was announced and the piece of the act came out, what we were hearing was a lot of uproar from adults saying, what will we call the support clubs that students have access to? rather than saying, how can we rely and use our collective wisdom to truly make our schools safe places for young people so that they don't feel the need to have support groups in the first place. We've gone off down a road that I don't think is helping us at all.
Okay, just finally, let me come full circle here, because we talked off the top about how this sounds touchy-feely, but you think is actually very effective. For a huge chunk of the population, I'm guessing, you still will have a tough case to make, because getting even feels good. Suspending and expelling makes, in the short run, parents feel like a school is taking their child's issue seriously. So how do you overcome a lot of those sort of long-standing cultural beliefs that what you're doing is kind of too sweet and the old way is better?
Yeah. Well, if I take bullying in particular, look at the bully. When they are suspended or expelled now, as they will be, what I find is that they have learned a couple of lessons along the way. Bullies have learned, A, that they need to get smarter about their bullying because they were caught. So next time I'm going to be more careful, and it will go underground. I will do it in the community, I will do it through the internet, I will continue to bully, but I will just be more savvy about doing it. Not sure that's a lesson we want to teach. The second lesson, and Deborah Pepler from York University says bullying is a learned behavior, it's about power. What we are showing them is the guy with the biggest stick wins. The person with the most power wins. Again, not a lesson.
Not a good lesson.
Not a good lesson for bullies, okay? To sit with their families in a circle process where that other child, that other family is there. They can talk about the impact, not only in terms of that victim's education and them being afraid of school, but just the impact within the home, the impact within the families who take time off work, the huge ripple effect out into the community, the impact on the bystanders who stood by and did nothing and therefore were sort of culpable in the action. To have all those people present at the same time addressing the issue, holding that young person accountable for what they've done in a very meaningful, practical way, and then saying, what are you going to do here to make amends? How are you going to clean up this mess? And we're going to monitor how well you do that. So principals have, in some boards, used this as a first step. They will hold a circle for the bullying situation. If it hasn't been resolved, if the bully does not do what they've promised to do, then they kick in the suspension, okay? So this might be, because the minister certainly talks about in the Act, using it as intervention, using it as early prevention. We can use circles all along that way, and even for the students who are suspended or expelled, when they come back to school, if nothing has changed in that relationship balance, it's going to continue.
Then nothing will change.
Right. So we use circles as part of a reentry.
Lynn, it's fascinating. Thanks so much for coming into
Very
TVO
welcome.
tonight and helping us out with this.
Thank you very much.
Lynn Zammit, Director of the Center for Transformative Practices.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.